Apologetics, or the field that means defending the faith, is not a mental field, it's a spiritual field. And this is mandated by the Bible. This verse has 3 mandates. First of all, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. You'll ask how Christ is the Lord, how is it not any other religion? All of this is answers in part of a long course that we offer in the seminary over 16 weeks. And I'll give you just a skeleton of it to see that there's answer to everything from different directions, even without touching the Bible. And second mandate, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the faith or the hope that you have. Because we don't hope for things that are seen, we hope for things that are unseen, and what's seen is what we exercise our talents in. But do this with gentleness and respect, not with fighting. So this verse has 3 things that every one of us has to have. In your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. And if we have doubts that Christ is Lord, the answer is not today. Maybe we can have other sessions from different directions, or maybe sign up for the course next fall. We have 3 hours of talks every week, and it's 16 weeks long, so we don't leave any stone unturned. But we have to be ready to give an answer, which we're going to give today from a certain aspect. And we do this in gentleness and respect, not with fighting and disrespecting the person in front of us. So this is the global drive behind apologetics, that in our behavior and knowledge, because our faith really is not blind, we are able to have the acute mind that can resist the wiles of the devil. A dull mind, a non-active intellect is a very, very big problem. Laziness, procrastination, and superficiality are the biggest cancer, and they seem like very simple sins, but they are very, very tough. Laziness and postponing and being superficial, they can kill any person spiritually. So be careful when you say, I'm just lazy. This is a cancer that eats bit by bit. So a dull mind is a mind like the devil planted in your activity something, and the wrong thing is growing instead of the right thing. Why do we study apologetics? To the people outside and to you, the people inside, which we care about even more. So we don't want you to have a doubt about anything. Also speaking in tongues and prophesying, because your career, what you do, what you study, is what will enable you when you go to the world to speak that language. Somebody studying engineering will speak to engineers or will behave among engineers. Somebody who does law, somebody who does medicine, accounting, whatever, that's the language you will speak in order to enable you to speak about Christ or to behave like Christ, which is more important. So 1 Corinthians 14 talked about speaking in tongues. We're not going to speak another language. It's not about Arabic, English, or whatever language. It's about in your profession and what you do, this is the language you will speak. I cannot do the work that you're going to do, but you can. Prophesying means the preaching. So 1 Corinthians 14 really plays a big role here. That's the course, actually. It's 4 levels of answering the doubt, because usually as church, and I thought about this quite a bit, and from the studies outside priesthood, it cannot be just any answer in any topic. It has to be organized. So the level number 1 is the toughest one, which is we should come out of it with the concept that there is a designer behind the world. We didn't say who he is, but there is a design in the world. So we're discussing this, evolution and design, God's existence. Lots of topics inside. There's mathematical challenges now, because there is a book that came out that says that the world came out of nothing. But he used a trick in math. I figured out it from reading the book. It's a very, very nice trick they used to convince and to challenge and to really weaken the thinking of the people. But it's once you understand it, you know it's just, it doesn't work. They fool you as college students by the difference between what's possible and what's probable. There's a big difference. There's a difference between the word something is possible, may be possible, and something is probable. And anything they make you feel it's possible to doubt the faith. For example, we have a long discussion about evolution and certain parts of the cell that works exactly as a computer that lends itself very well to a design. Somebody designed it. And then if you read into the cell book of biology, the things they explain in order to avoid that there is a designer, maybe, probably, the evolution talk in it is so weak compared to see how that system works. This is magnificent, but it's not covered today. This is not about evolution today. But the evolution has so many challenges, mathematical, statistics, engineering, and what they say to you, some things, and they say it's possible. And then people believe, oh, since a scientist said it's possible, then it's probable. Probable is completely different than possible. Probably, what is the probability it will happen? And it could be zero. So do not be fooled when any scientist says, but it's possible, because I have a book that says the world come out of nothing, because the zero, which is nothing, is something. So he's using math wrongly. And there's things in functions called singularities and discontinuities. He's using this to say by math, something can be nothing, or nothing can be something. And then he inserts the word that possibly the world came out of nothing. No, it's not possible. It is, even if you say it's possible, it's not probable. What you showed here is a nice mathematical exercise to insert in your mind the word possible. I talked with an atheist about, he was the one who introduced me to that book. And he said, it's not proven today, but maybe in 300 or 400 years it will be proven. I said, really? 300 or 400 years will be proven, and now you say it's possible? Yes, Talama, the book said it's possible, I can give it the possibility. And he, unfortunately, insisting on his thought. I saw them other things. We discussed it that were very mathematical and very probable, but he just doesn't follow it. In any case, we'll get into the topic, but I just want to tell you that level 1, you use math, you use engineering, you use medicine, you use history. Is a big deal about the existence of a person called Jesus from sources that are non-Christian. At level 1, you don't touch Christianity at all. All of this wrap around a conclusion. Yes, I'm convinced now that there has to be a designer, or there has to be someone. We don't identify him yet. So in level 2, which one is he? In which religion? So this discusses all of the topics that relates to why we should conclude, and there is logical proofs, not about the resurrection, but mathematically as well, to conclude that Christianity is the right one. Take it by faith now, because this is again a long course. I will not be able to cover everything. Okay, if it's Christianity is the right one, which Christianity? Is it Protestantism? Is it non-denominational? Is it apostolic? So we study in this level all of these comparisons, and we should conclude from it, it's the apostolic. And then this is what the church has focused on most of the time, which is digging deeper into our own Christianity. And that's why some of the youth are not convinced, because the answer always comes from level 4, whereas we have to cover, actually, by the way, we have 16 lectures in the class. 9 of them is just in level 1, because this is we have to give logical answers without using the Bible. There is science and there is history. And let's get into today. So,
an ancient cloth with a mysterious image of a crucified man.
Something extraordinary had happened here.
Some believe the most important religious artifact in history.
Scientists can't tell us how it came to be. It's religion and science.
Now, modern technology brings
Literally see the resurrected.
revealing for the first
introduction about religion, documents that are written, opposing the cloth, the challenges to it, mainly another fact that says, look into this deeper, and let's see what it leads us to. So why study the Shroud? It's for non-Christians to prove the resurrection of Christ. It's a document that says, look deeper into here, and try to explain what it says. And you'll find it's very profound. It's a scientific statement from the Lord to the scientists who may deny Christ in order to make the truth for them be clear in front of them, speaking to them in their own language. So let's jump into it. Because it's reconstructing the face of the one on the cloth, there is these 2 psalms that almost fulfill it. Seek my face, my heart says unto thee, O Lord, your face I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not put your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not leave me, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. This is a contemplation for us to contemplate seeing the face of the man on the cloth. So a scientific approach, you create a hypothesis, you present the facts that support it, and you answer the challenges that oppose it. So I'm presenting here as if it's a paper. It's a linen sheet. The weave of it, or the way the linen sheet is done, herringbone weave. This is the length of it, 436 centimeters and 110 centimeters, with frontal and dorsal images. Dorsal means back. There are 4 documents that say story about that cloth and where it came from, not the cloth itself, but what happened to the man that the cloth is presenting. And the account is mentioned here, and it says in St. John 20, the proof of an empty tomb. Then the other disciple went into and had been the first to arrive, that St. John, and St. Peter was running slower at the sepulchre, and he saw and believed. This is the account of the 4 Gospels, but again, we're focused today on the scientific, because we're presenting it as if it's a scientific piece of cloth, and what's on it votes very much to a certain pointer. This is sort of what the tomb looks like, not the tomb of Christ, but this is how the sepulchres look like of rich people, because we know that Joseph Arimathea put him in a rich tomb, not just something on the ground.
It's a mystery that mankind has been trying to uncover for almost 2,000 years.
From this, different icons will come. This is after looking at the shroud. But let's get into it deeper, what it's talking about.
The Shroud of Turin is a 14-foot-long linen cloth. It's 3.5 feet wide. It's made out of flax. It is made out of a very distinctive weave, which is called a 3-to-1 herringbone pattern weave.
Actually very similar to the pattern you see in Arabian jeans. There's actual holes in the shroud. There are burn marks on it. There was a fire in 1532 that nearly destroyed the shroud.
It burned holes through the cloth, and actually those are more prominently visible on the shroud than the image itself.
That's a general description. Let's get into it. Historically, the shroud obviously started from Jerusalem, went to Edessa, went to Constantinople, then went to Lyria, and then Chambéry, and then Turin. Let's trace it. In 544 Edessa, and 944 in Constantinople, and 1147 Louis VII venerated it at Constantinople. In 1204, Constantinople was occupied by Crusaders, written testimony of seeing the shroud. This is an icon of Edessa showing the picture of the shroud as an icon presented to the king of Edessa. In 1353, the shroud appears in Lyria, France, possession of Geoffrey de Chauny. In 1502, it kept in a niche cut into a wall in the altar of Sainte-Chapelle Church in Chambéry. And then in 1532, this is very, very important. A fire had left clear marks on the shroud. Repairs were made to the burnt areas that in the form of U-shaped cloth pieces. These became more visible, which is these pieces here. You see these U-shaped pieces that cover the burnt areas, otherwise the shroud or the cloth would cut and it will be destroyed. There are smaller holes that will play a huge role later on. You see them here, these 4 small holes, and above there, these 5 small holes. Can you guys see them? Can you see the small ones? These ones. This one and this one. Just keep a mental note of it. The big ones, they were retrofitted or they were fixed by these U-shape. 1570 to shorten the on foot from shroud as a full. This is Chambéry, because there is a bishop that created as a vow, and obviously found within Fissa and Constantinople. Shroud side, this is the building here. You will see this magnificent shape that's in the back of the church. You see the church dome is there, and behind it there is this thing that's even higher, which that what the plants that got stuck to the shroud that support that year marked it. Law that you can capture light by in front of you, a negative image of a new field called is negative here because this is the first, this is the exposition or pictures of the exposition in 1898. This is people sitting and watching the shroud, nothing scientific so far. Here's what starts questions. So Secondopea has this is a camera, by the way. Of course, we came long way from then. So as a lawyer, afforded to buy this new thing called photography. There's no film inside, it's an emulsion. It's a plate of glass that's treated chemically. You show thing in front of the camera for a few seconds, and it gathers on the film, and then you develop that, it gathers on the glass, you develop it, and you see a negative image of what's in front of the camera. So there is what they have allowed for him to take a picture of. So let's see a movie that represents it. So that's Secondopea.
Took a picture, took it back to his dark room.
And he has this negative plate submerged in the developer solution. And as he pulls the negative plate out of the developer solution, he sees for the first time an image that nobody else has ever seen.
He was astounded. The story goes that he was so astounded he almost dropped a piece of glass.
The image, for some reason, was so much more lifelike, so much more realistic, so much more clarity than what you see on the shroud itself.
Being the religious man that he was, he said he was looking into the face of the Lord.
So his image, his photo negative of the image, is what spread around the world and really lit the fire of Shroud devotion.
Let's explain this. Why is he surprised? Why was he surprised with what he saw? Guess. Exactly. Do you know the rest of the presentation? That's exactly the number one anomaly. So again, we're not presenting Christ, nothing religious. We're going to present a scientific approach. What the camera does, it looks at the scene. If this wall is white, I'm going to get it on the emulsion or the chemically treated material surface. I'm going to get it as what? Black. What he got was positive, which means that the image he's looking at is what? Is what? Is reversed. Why would a painter, if this is a forgery, which painter in the whole history of the world painted a negative in reversed color? None. So the number one thing to present, to think about scientifically, the image on that cloth is what? Negative or positive? Negative. So Secondopea, when he took a picture of it, he's expecting something negative with reverse colors. It was positive, and that was the biggest anomaly. There's two more coming about just the imaging. So let's keep going. This is in 1978. Because of this and because of something else we'll see later, I started this frenzy of visiting the Shroud because it presents a scientific anomaly. The negative image and two other things we're going to talk about. So this is when the Catholic Church allowed that there is scientists that exposed the Shroud to more than 100,000 hours of research in different fields, and in the meantime, the public got a chance to really get exposition of it. This is Pope John Paul is venerating the Shroud, and this is very important because we told you that the Shroud was owned by Geoffrey, the House of Savoy. He's donating it now to the Catholic Church. So let's get some start on the medical examination. The pollen will be just one slide, and the image, that's what I like to spend more time on in order to present scientific, and then the challenges to the Shroud and how we answer them. So on the medical examiner table, here is the doctors and the professors that were used in that research. I present here their names and their job and affiliation, and it's tons of them in different fields. All of this are just the medical approach. All of them in different fields that has done the medical research or examination on the cloth. So let's see a glimpse. This is all in itself a huge topic. So on it there is facial and head wounds, there is hand and arm wounds, and there's scourge marks, scourge from the flogging or the scourging of the man of the cloth. This is an overview of it, so let's look at it.
Bears an image on ventral, front, and back dorsal of a human figure.
The image on the Shroud of Turin is certainly consistent with what we know was a Roman crucifixion.
That figure has been beaten, tortured, scourged, speared in the sides.
He is apparently crucified. He has an obvious wound through one of the wrists.
But you can't see the other one because they're on top of each other like this. There are no thumbs visible, just 4 fingers on each hand.
And the exit wound is basically near the wrist, which is actually forensically perfect.
The left foot is planted firmly against the cloth with the image of the right heel, almost like one foot was placed on the other.
There is a wound side, which is, if you look at the biblical tradition, that is where Jesus was lanced on the cross. It would be in about that place.
And there's blood flowing down from that wound.
The body itself is covered with scourge marks from a Roman flagrant, approximately 120 of them.
The back image shows remarkably very clear a pattern of blood stains all over the top of the head, the back of the head, from the crown of thorns. When you're looking at the face, you can see that one of the eyes seems to be a little closed.
Both cheekbones swollen, one more than the other.
The nose may be a little crooked, almost not broken.
There's a lot of blood on the face.
Blood on the forehead, blood in the beard, blood in the hair.
It's almost like an autopsy, but an autopsy of a man who suffered unbelievably.
It is a remarkable, remarkable image.
So there's 4 documents that tells us that this man has been scourged with galad on the back. It tells us that he has been crucified. It tells us that there's something called crown of thorns was in his head, and that he was lanced in the side, speared. So there is 4 documents. I'm not present this, we're not going to use religious terms. The 4 documents, this cloth supports the story that these 4 documents convey about what happened to this person. 4 things. He was scourged, he was he was nailed in his hand and in his feet, and he was speared in the side, and he had a crown or something that plunged in his head that caused the blood to come out of the head, from the front and from the back. And the way it was in the back, it was covering the head, not just a crown, it could have been almost a hat of thorns. Just think, it's hard to think non-religiously, but this is very adequate for us to contemplate on the evidence that God is leaving for us about the cloth. So let's take it a little bit. On the forehead, there is what the scientists call the inverted 3. This is a very famous mark as they study the shroud, and unfortunately the mouse is not working, but do you see the inverted 3? Do you see this? The shape? These two traces coming out. Why do you think there is 2 traces coming out from a wound? Why there is 2, not 1? I mean, when you bleed 1, right? Why there is 2? What was Christ's head doing on the cross from this? What would cause 2 directions of falling of the blood from your head? Yes, what you just did. Are you cracking your... Christ's position, his head was in two positions. And these positions are exactly, the blood will fall by gravity. So position 1 is to this side in order for this trace to be straight, and then more to the side in order for the second trace to be. So his head was taking different positions on the cross to alleviate the pain that's happening from the crucifixion. That's why there is two traces. And the angle between them defined the two positions. I'm going to show you more of this. All of this blood is physically, the hastiness of burying the man on the cloth quickly because the sun is coming down and because the following Saturday is a high Sabbath. High Sabbath means it's a feast. Not only a Sabbath, it's a feast and a Sabbath. So we call it a high Sabbath. So we have to rush it. And that's why his body was not washed. And that helped very much in keeping this. There's another shroud, by the way, that you don't know about that supports this called the Sedarium of Oviedo, but that's completely supporting this, but nobody knows anything about it. So we're just focusing on Turin today. Let's keep going. This is the positive, because what you see on the cloth is this. Taban, when you do the positive, because this is the trick that scientists knew, it becomes even clearer and more pronounced, and you can see the traces there. Medically, it's arterial as well as venal blood. The head is full of blood transport system. The man who suffered this pain was still alive, because you can differentiate between alive blood, a cadaveric blood, the blood which comes out after the person dies. The scientists, as I told you, the list of scientists, this is not church scientists, this is all scientific medical research, concluded this is the blood of a live person. There is so much research done on this blood. I will list the names for it because it takes a doctor to explain it more, and the time. There is one to the chest. Here is the full picture, and this is the focus on. There's a big bulk of blood on the side of that deceased man, which is described by this picture graphically. That explains exactly where it went and why water and blood came out. Water and blood came out not because we put water on the blood in the chalice. That is not it. Water and blood came out because of the accumulation of water in the body as the person dies, and the water that's formed in the lungs because of asphyxiation. He died suffocated. The water is forming out. This punctured this, so what comes out? Water and what? And blood, or blood and water. Scientifically, it's very, very, very clear. Blood and water has to come out. So sometimes when we hear contemplations about we add water to the blood because of this, no. We add water to the blood for another reason. That comes from the Jewish tradition, but that's for example an answer that will be at level 4 for our apologetics, which is the easier level. The hand has a piercing that matches the graphical representation. It's in the wrist here, and it's very clearly manifested, at this image. Another example, if you see here, there are multiple traces of the blood. I wish I could use the mouse. But if you see in the hand also, there is two lines. One is horizontal and one is a little bit oblique to it. Do you see these two lines? Why would they have two? If you think about the head, it's the same reason. Christ's position on the cross for breathing. He's sometimes down and he's sometimes up. What does that do to the hand if the hand is fixed here? Do you see what's happening? The blood will fall sometimes like this. When the hand is like this, the blood will fall like this. So you have an angle between these two traces, and that angle is 10 degrees. Exactly, you can measure what are the two positions of the same arm for Christ breathing. You know how much he had to breathe? 2,700 times. That's for 3 hours. How is he stepping to breathe? He has to stand on the nail that's in his leg to come up. That ate up the bone of the leg where the nail went. So the amount of pain, this is after the account of the documents and what the cloth presents, the scourging and the crown, and now the crucifixion. He's losing blood quickly. There is very nice relationship between losing the blood and something that Nicodemus did. He brought 1,000 pounds of myrrh and aloe, and in the spectrometry results, you find the blood constituents and myrrh and aloe appearing as in the blood. Amazing support to these documents. Because the Jews, for reasons I cannot get into now, it's another topic, cannot allow lots of blood to leave the body. So what Joseph and Nicodemus did, they got a lot of myrrh and aloe to plug his wounds. The Sidarim of Oviedo, which is about the cloth that covered his head, not the one they wiped his hand with. This is not Veronica's handkerchief. It's another piece of cloth that covered his head as he was dying on the cross and bringing him down, and it was kept in the tomb with him. But it was not put under the shroud. The shroud just completely wrapped the body of Christ. There is a person, very clearly, there's lots of blood around the nose because the person was trying to plug the nose of Christ. Why plugging the nose of Christ? Because when he dies, the water and the blood is coming out of his nose, and they have to keep the blood in his body for reasons that related to biblical reasons. So the cloth, this one, and Oviedo's cloths present an amazing congruency with the documents of the Old Testament and the documents of the New Testament. The forearms, the space of the stot is this space up there where the nail goes. Natural gap between the bones, allowing for easy insertion of a nail, and the Romans know this very, very quickly. It would damage the median nerve that goes to the hand, which carries the sensory and the motor activation for the hand. It will cause muscle contraction. It will cause the thumb to do this. That's why on the cloth you don't see the thumb, because this nail cuts that nerve and causes the thumb to do this automatically. And that's why the thumb doesn't appear on the shroud. The flogging, the head and the upper, this is from the back. And this is the positive and this is the negative. You see in the back, you see the shoulders have very much pain from the flogging and from carrying something heavy. Deeply embedded thorns in the back of the head may have damaged a branch of the occipital artery and the deeper veins of the posterior vertebral plexus. This is things in the head. Right and left shoulder are two areas of greater intensity in the image, carrying of the cross horizontal member. And the back shows the Roman scourges. Philip Barbet, he says there are so many journals, scientific journals presented on, I must add only those lashes producing an excoriation. He counted the lashes that's on the cloth, the lashes from the scourging. They leave a certain mark that got caught on the image. Only those that cause excoriation or contusion have left their mark. In all, I have counted more than 100 of these, perhaps 120. And from the shape of them, you can conclude that the machine that was used to do, because they leave two contusions in the form of circles connected by blood, deeper blood, it would suggest one of these shapes. And it would add up to 120. If we multiply 40 by 3, we'll give you what? So if that machine was used, it lends itself to the probability. It could match the document account that he was scourged 39 times. This is more images of the blood on the head. Deeper looks at it and on the hand. And this is the angle that I told you can come from this 1 and 2 traces. The way the blood traces looks like on the arm. Using gravity, you can draw the angle between the two positions of the arm to be 10 degrees and with the vertical to be 65 degrees. Here is a small focus on what it would leave. It's not just a small dot, it's two of them that would lend itself to such a machine has been used. There's blood across the back, which lends itself to this is the way he was carried hastily, quickly, to bury him, which means that the blood that was coming from the lancing has started to go through back and form a trace around the back. So there's a very deep wound, actually this is the reflection of it, a very deep wound on this side, and it carries across the lumbar region of the back. So for the blood across the back, from the piercing and cutting wound to the chest, first collected under the right elbow here, and then flowed to be under the left one, crossing the lumbar region. It's a cadaveric blood. It's not a live person's blood, because we know the scientist said this after he died. And the Bible says that to make sure that he died, the Longinus stabbed him with a spear. So there's a document that says the order of the events, and medically it says this is the blood of person who died already. The feet. We can see also from the trace on the cloth, the full blood on the left feet, and then part what's on the right, because in his burial, the stiffness of the body made the person to be buried in the same way he had his feet, which is the right on top of the left, and outside the left, the full trace of blood, and the right was the heel only. Chest wounds, shoulder injuries, leg and foot wounds, and the conclusion very clearly, they are of a human being because of the analysis of the blood. Here is more focus on it. This is the chest. Sorry, this is the spear on the chest, the side wound. This is more on the back, more on the legs. The dorsal feet, which needs to be squished. So the focus on this area here. It's the same as we shown before, just different depiction. The location of the nail, and it eats up the bone that's in touch with it because he has to stand on the nail for 3 hours to breathe. Same thing with the location in the hand. This is for any medical student, this is the medical tests that were done on the blood in order to prove it's a human blood, what type of blood, what's the content on it, things that really leave with no doubt that this is a human blood. I will not go in it because we discussed this in detail in the class, but not here. This is the amount of density of the arteries and the veins in the head. And there is a unique method that the blood was transferred. It didn't leave any smears on the cloth. There is more and more pointers to the man on the cloth. Let's get more into the blood.
It's the image itself that tells the most compelling story.
Everything that we see on the shroud with regard to the injuries that the man sustained are perfectly consistent with what we see in the gospel account. You have a man who is both crucified and scourged. Remember from the biblical story, Pilate did not want to kill Jesus. Therefore, he had him scourged, hoping that would placate those that were calling for his crucifixion. So now we have a man who is both severely scourged and crucified, which is a very unique anomaly.
The figure's agonizing wounds are marked in blood all over the shroud.
There's a lot of blood on the shroud. There's a tremendous amount of blood that flowed from the head, scourging all over the body. There's blood that flows from the side wound. There's also blood that puddles across the small of the back from that side wound.
These stains tell a horrifying story. But they also get in the way of the image. To raise the victim's face back from the cloth, the graphics team will have to separate the man.
This I'll explain later what he does with it. But anyway, these are papers about just the blood, and this is the names of it and the publications and what they confirm. Very, very clear. I will not mention them. They're just there for faith that this is a scientific process, not a religious process. Spectrometry. Spectrometry is a device that measures a content of something by illuminating it with light and then seeing the reflection of that light and measuring which wavelength that light brings back. And based on the wavelength, they can know what's the material that's contained in the specimen. So in the blood, it confirms from a spectrometry analysis that it's a human blood by what it contains. And it also contains definitely the aloe and the myrrh as part of the blood. So Dr. Adler, this United States meeting of Canadian Society for Forensic Sciences reported the same. The following authors used fluorescent antibodies method, demonstrated that the hematic traces of threads taken in 1978 are those of human blood. So let's talk about getting the blood more pronounced in the image. So who has used Photoshop here? You know what Photoshop? Yeah, very good. If you want to make a color more, a red color more red in a Photoshop, what do? You go with your measurement tool, you put it on one of the red traces, and then you get the sample, okay, and then you tell the Photoshop, convert this color to be in the old image more what? More red. then everything with that color will become what? More red. This is what they did here. So let's see what they did in order to process the image.
What we did is we exaggerated that. We pumped more yellow to the end.
This is image enhancement of the picture of the shroud.
Just ripping the blood.
Do you see what happened? This is what happened to that man of the cross.
Astonishing image of the amount of blood on the shroud. Exceeding my expectations entirely. And I was taken back by how much blood is actually present there. They beat this man to hell.
Just image enhancement with the picture of the shroud gives you this result. This is all no added information. It's just enhancing the information for our eye distribution, because our eye has a certain transfer function to see in an enhanced way how the cloth looks like. Nothing here is added. And you can see the contusions from the flogging. You can see the back of the head is drenched with blood. You can see as the camera was zooming up, the blood that's across the lumbar region. You can see it's all of flogging reaching the feet, of course the hands and the legs. You read the 4 documents that are written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Thank God they are not identical. Thank God. Otherwise they would say it's copied from one another. The best thing about these documents is that they are not identical. And they have things that they may seem discrepancy. They are not, if you understand them, how they are looking at it. But the best thing is that we have 4 accounts, not copies from one and a cut and paste. That's the beauty of these 4 documents. So there's also the pollen research. I told you there is now, this Max Fry is world-renowned researcher in where plants come from in the world, and they call this pollen. And he analyzed the pollen attached to this cloth. And he gives us exactly matching the trace that we have shown in the beginning. I will not talk much about it. Pollen is identical with the pollen most common in the sediments of Lake Gennesaret, in those sedimentary strata which are 2,000 years old. Another specimen from Asia Minor, as we said, he's in Edessa, from the neighborhood of Constantinople, Edessa and then Constantinople, and a great number of pollen from France and Italy. Now we get to the third and most compelling, in my opinion, actually, besides the medical, very, very amazing. So let's remember the image. Remember the unintended surprise that the French lawyer found about the image showed that the image on the shroud is what? Is a negative. This is the number 1 document challenge that says who paints a negative. Second thing, it's not drawn, it's not burned by any marks. There is the traces on the cloth. You can never find any traces of painting or pigment or burning or anything that would cause the image. And this is the second thing. So number 1, it's negative. Number 2, it is not a painting. It was not painted. It was not done by burning. Up till now, they don't know how the image is formed. So let's talk about this.
It's pretty hard to believe that someone could just look at it in the 1300s and say, aha, it's a painted forgery, when we've subjected it to several 100,000 hours of analysis to today, and we can't come up with the idea that it's a painted forgery.
That document has not held up very well, at least not for Pierre Narcisse.
Those early caveats were very quickly forgotten, and people went on with the business of accepting it as it was for quite a long while.
It would take nearly 6 centuries to disprove the bishop's assertion.
In 1978, a group of scientists were selected to study the shroud. These were not selected by the church, these were selected in the United States. John Jackson of Colorado headed up the effort. And it was multidisciplinary. You had chemists and physicists and all kinds of specialties.
We were given 5 days, round-the-clock access to the shroud to study it with then high-technology equipment.
I came into this being a total skeptic. You know, being a photographer, I pulled out my trusty 10x magnifier. I started looking at the imagery. And there were no particulates. There was no paint. There was no medium. There was nothing there except slightly darker, discolored surface fibers. Just the tops of the fibers.
Surface fibers.
And at that point in time, I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't a painting.
Nor is it a drawing, or a photograph, or a scorch mark. So what made the image? After 30 years of intensive analysis, the scientists who examined the shroud still have no idea.
They concluded that they really didn't know how the image was formed at all. And that was the really important discovery. And to some extent, this frustrated the scientists because they really wanted some answers and never yet.
Of course, they're coming back and scratching their heads and saying, this is not easily solved.
It's not fake, it's not a painting, it's not a photograph. So in essence, we can tell you what it's not, but we can't tell you what it is.
So if somebody says it's radioactive or any of these things, radioactive will leave a picture throughout the whole cloth. The picture is so faint. First of all, you have to look at the distance. If you look closely, you'll not see the difference. Our eye has some spatial or frequency analysis that makes us at a certain distance we see the collective thing better than if we look closer to it. And there is nothing on the cloth that you can analyze. It's a paint, it's a brush stroke, it's a burning, none of this. So up till now, number two, presentation of the quality of the image. Number one, it's negative. Number two, up till now, scientifically, it is not known how it was formed. Let's get to number three. I think this is also an interesting thing to look at, just a summary.
Religious believers and scientists alike were suddenly caught up in the mystery.
How is it possible that the shroud image is a negative image on the cloth, because what appears in a photo negative is actually a positive image? How is that possible? And so this then begins the scientific era.
This is what it's not. It's not a painting, it's a vapograph, it's not an imprint due to body heat or funeral anointing. It was not made by a natural means of draping of cloth over a human body. It is not a block print, it's not a scorch, it's not formed by draping the cloth over a statue or bas-relief. It was not made from rubbing dry compounds on the cloth. It's not any of these. What it is, no one knows. Because again, very slight discoloring on the surface of the fibers. If you just take this fiber and start peeling them, you lose the image. So any radioactive will give you an image on both sides of the cloth. Actually, it's not. It's on one side, both frontal and dorsal, the way that man of the shroud was wrapped. But you don't find it on the opposite side, which is any radioactive thing that would scorch or would hypothetically would leave an image without any painting, or would leave it throughout the cloth, not only on the surface and on one surface, on just one surface, not both double-sided, and not through the cloth as well. The third one is really the magnificent, not really, and I want to emphasize it more, but it's dear to me due to studies, which is what we'll see here. When you take your phone, the image on the shroud is, oh, it's not my phone, it's the recording phone. If you take your camera and you take a picture, the bright parts and the dark parts of the picture is because of what? Because of the distance of the thing from the picture, or because of the color of what I'm looking at? When you take a camera and take a picture, what makes something brighter than the other in the picture? Distance or brightness? Brightness. So the picture is what, 2D or 3D that you're taking? 2D. The picture on the shroud is 3D. Think about it again. The picture on the shroud, the brightness is a function of how far the face of the man from the cloth. And if you take this picture and you plot it up, you'll get a 3D face. Are you getting what's happening? This is, who paints in 3D? Who makes the brightness? You mean the painting of 3D of the Middle Ages or any ages about the isometric, like the vanishing point, but there is 3D encoded in the 2D image. And this is really what caused the huge frenzy of the shroud. So basically this is what I'm saying here. In imaging, the brightness of a point on the shroud, it's 3D. The brightness of a point on the shroud is related to how far, that's distance. That's not how bright the face of Christ is related to how far this point is from the cloth. So the cloth is like this on the whole body. The distance that's left on the image, the image itself has brightness and darkness shades. That's the function of the distance of the body from the cloth. So if you take this image and plot it in 3D up, you'll get the 3D of the whole body of that man. And that was this movie is about, how to reconstruct the whole body of this man. I'm not going to call him Christ or Jesus or God so far, because I'm presenting it as a scientific realm, as very objective presentation for the listener to think about. So John Jackson and his partner Eric Jumper in the Air Force Academy in Colorado found that there's a mathematical relationship between intensity of the image on the shroud and the cloth to body distance. And this manifested in this VP8 computer that plots topography. Topography means it plots up the intensity. When you look at a picture and you lay it down, it's going to plot the intensity of every location in the image. It will plot it up. And let's see what we're going to get. They use it to plot the surface of the moon or the surface of Earth to see where the mountains and the valleys. So that's called topography. So we'll take just a picture of the shroud and put it in this machine, the VP8 computer, and see what comes out.
Jackson and his colleagues run a photograph of the Shroud's face through a VP8 image analyzer, a special computer that makes topographical maps of the moon and other heavenly bodies.
Now, this device basically establishes a sense of elevation by looking at light and darkness on the image.
What comes up on the screen is unlike any other photograph the machine had ever analyzed.
All of a sudden, I could see a three-dimensional relief representation of the intensity structures of the shroud.
This image zooms off the view screen in this amazing 3D contour. No painting has it, no artwork has it. It is totally unique to the Shroud.
As soon as I saw what the significance of this was,
the reason that it was so stunning was that it demonstrated that this cloth must have wrapped a three-dimensional human form. This doesn't occur because somebody painted it on a flat surface. This is the significance of the VPA.
Just one of the aspects of the imaging. And the imaging is one of the aspects of the research. We have the pollen, we have the medical, we have the historical. I'm just leaving 3 points here to ponder about. This is an absolute anomaly, 3D image that's captured in a 2D surface. He even took a picture of the shroud and just put it there, just copied it, as if it's a copier machine, and just put it there and he plotted it up. And this is what you get. This is what you get originally, and then what you do in the right, you low pass filter. It's called smoothing filter. That you get. This is just from a 2D image of the cloth in the face area. There's no device that can give you 3D. All cameras take 2D. Actually, there is no device that can give you 3D, but we're talking about 2D color images. Because the brightness of each pixel in your phone is a function of the light that's falling on it. This is the internal, by the way, of your phone camera. It's an array of electronics. Each pixel converts light to electricity. When you read it out, you get what's called a digital image. This is a cut in it. This is just present to scientific realm to tell them in details that there is difference between brightness and depth. The camera gathers brightness and converts it to electricity, and you read it sequentially. You form a digital image, and it gets presented on the screen. Then you see what you have taken. So let's see, after correcting geometrically for the curvature of the face, because there is geometric conversion. Again, this is preserved for scientific audience. We're going to go into what he does.
The first thing we did when we started trying to analyze what was going on with the shroud was to trace it onto a piece of cloth and then lay that trace on top of a head and see what happened. Really helping to show what's going on with the shroud and bring it this reading and show how to build it. Exactly. By imitating those distortions, we could could take the Shroud image and put it back into that shape and figure out what the face looked like. It gave us a clue.
You can see the figure looks more human.
Yeah, looking really good. You think you'll be able to use this profile?
Yeah, it's going to be very helpful because what I can do.
Okay. So after correcting, these squares are basically to correct the 2D wrapping to make it corrected for the visualization of the 3D information, just a geometric transformation. But the data of the 3D is coming from the image as I just showed you by the VP8 imager or the VP8 analyzer. Are you following so far what's happening with the images? Okay. So why do people say forget the shroud? Anybody knows why? Nobody says it's scientifically supported. I mean, we've given here a presentation for that's a fraction. I made the medical very quickly. So the challenges to the shroud. Okay, you can form a negative image in the, not really in the Middle Ages, but when photography was discovered by something called the camera obscura. Camera obscura is a box, you put a lens in front of it, and then you show a film in the back and let it see something, and your film that you will get in the back, you can put a cloth there, expose that thing for 8 hours, and you get a negative. The picture that you will get has no details. It's like a ghost. If you use this system, single lens, because the lens that you have in the camera, I should have brought this, the lens that you have on your phone is a lens stack. There is lens, and these lenses move in and out in order to put things in the correct resolution, the edges appear correctly. So the camera obscura is one of the 4 really weak challenges how to form a negative image on a cloth. And I watched a presentation about it, and they say really you can use a certain cloth, expose it for 8 hours, you'll get a negative image. And that's all the answer. And in order to fix that image on the cloth, you can use a very cheap material, a very cheap liquid, and that's basically the urine. Sorry to mention that. The urine fixes the chemicals on it, and here you have a shroud. And that's people did this in order to generate money, because it's one money-making cloth that people would love to have it. If you dig, this is, again, as I told you in the beginning, scientists say anything, and if you don't know the details, it's possible, and then you believe it. The images formed by this method are horrifically looking. There is no details. The image details on the shroud is unbelievable. So this method, imaging-wise, leaves a horrific negative image. And if you have this urine in it in order to fix the image, because it says it's something very available, it says that anybody can do the replica of it because it's something very available to do this, to make this negative stick on the image. It doesn't appear in the spectrometry. If that was a fake, then the spectrometry of the shroud would have shown urine sample in it. I'm saying the urine because this is what the author says about the camera obscura as the method that in the Middle Ages they would have used. And then he would say that somebody just comes and kills an animal and splatters some blood on it. Here you have a shroud. So this is my answer to it. The image will not have the details of the scourging or anything else. A chemical element called the fixer must be applied to the cloth in order to create the negative. The spectral analysis doesn't show any fixer, and I'm just answering lightly, but you can search books and on the internet how the images would look like. Here is the more aggressive one, and I want to answer it tonight because this is what people are left with. Oh, the dating of the shroud is like 1390, cannot be the shroud of Christ.
Which, if the carbon date is correct, would indicate that the shroud is
A fraud.
700 years old.
700 years old only, because that's what carbon dating says.
It's right around the time it enters this historical record as far as we know, and it does seem to raise some serious questions about its history being any older than that.
If that's the case, it can't possibly be the shroud of Jesus.
Immediately, it was declared that the shroud was dead. Newspapers carried around the world. Anybody who doubts that should be a member of the Flat Earth Society.
But we shouldn't be devastated. There are so many reasons for us to put that testing into doubt. Not from a religious point of view, from a scientific point of view.
There are a number of theories that challenge the findings. Some suggest that the samples cut from the corner of the sacred cloth may not have been part of the original shroud at all.
There's clear evidence that the sample that was used to create the shroud in 1988 was cut from the corner of the cloth that was medieval American cloth.
Others point out that repeated handling of the shroud over the centuries could have contaminated the samples and skewed the results.
The location of the sample that was cut was from the outside corner edge, exactly where it has been held and handled hundreds of times in public exhibitions ever since 1418. There are numerous etchings and paintings of these exhibitions, and in every case, they are holding the shroud at that corner. And so, if you wanted to find the worst possible location to find a sample to cut the shroud, you would cut it from that corner, and that's exactly what happened. The public doesn't know that. All the public knows is the soundbite.
That's not enough. That's not convincing. So I dug in deeper. The Hungarian prayer manuscripts, it has pictures. This Hungarian prayer manuscripts is dated to 1190. 1190. And the carbon dating is saying it's what? The shroud is what date? 1260 to what? 1290 to 13 what? 1360. So we just said here, it's okay. I don't even remember the dates anyway. So 1290 to what? 1360. Number one challenge, the sample really was taken from a bad place. Okay, I'm not going to consider this convincing. But if I can show icons that's drawn by somebody who saw the shroud prior to 1290, that's more proof, right? So I'm going to show a manuscript. The icons in that manuscript must be drawn by somebody who saw the shroud. I'm going to lead you through it. So let's talk about the manuscript itself, because the manuscript is in 1190 or the 1100s, which is prior to the 1260 or 1290 to 1360 proposed by the carbon dating. This is one of the icons on it. Let's talk about the manuscript first. Pray manuscript, hereafter I'm going to abbreviate it as PM, is reliably dated between 1192 to 1195, having been compiled in Hungary, Moldova Monastery, built from 1175 and destroyed in 1285. In 1813, it was named after Georgi Prey, who discovered it in 1770. And then the Prey presumably discovered the Prey manuscript papers in the archives of the university, this Sompat University in nearby Slovakia, where he was professor of theology from 1750 to 1777. That's the date of the discovery. Prey donated it to the University of Budapest in 1784. What's Moldova Monastery? Here it is. Between 1175 and 1180, the Ordo Saint Benedict built a monastery at Moldova. The monastery church was erected to St. John the Baptist. The ruins of this rotunda were excavated in 1980s. A famous codex called the Prey Codex, one of the oldest Hungarian texts, a book called The Speech of the Funeral. It's a book for funerals. It's an oldest handwritten Hungarian text dating 1192 to 1195. Remember these dates, 1192 to 1195. That's the date that they associated with it, because the discovery of the manuscript in the monastery, in the ruins of it, and they did that because of what's in it and the language used and so forth. It's a funeral sermon. It's the oldest surviving Hungarian and Uralic text. The codex also features Missal and Easter mystery play, songs with musical notation, laws from the time of Koloman of Hungary, annals that list the Hungarian kings. It's a very big manuscript. Here is pictures of it, very nicely colored. You can see this on the screen, but you cannot print it. And this is what we see as colors. We're going to see the icons that are in it. It is highly unlikely, to put it mildly, that a forger would go from France to look at it and then copy it and call it the new shroud. So, because they say that the shroud happened in the 1390, so how did he make a copy? How did he make a forgery? Or he must have gone to Hungary, looked at this manuscript and copied it on a piece of cloth and said, this is the the Christ. This is impossible, to travel 2,500 kilometers round trip from France to Hungary and back to copy it in an age where gullible public would be satisfied by just much less. Very elaborate scheme. These two icons are on it. This is the cover, and this is bringing Christ from the cross. And you can see here St. John and Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea and one of the ladies, St. Mary. So the account of who is in the image matches the account of these four documents called by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John about the people who are under the cross. More is coming. This is the most important icon. Up there, it has the burial. Down there has the resurrection. Let's see who's up there. Who's the three people up there with this man on that straight, laying straight? Who are these people? There's three people. Who are they? Joseph of Arimathea. Who else? Nicodemus. And who's the younger one? St. John. Very good. In the lower one, what is it? Who's on the left? An angel. Right? And the ones on the right are ladies or men? Ladies. So this is about what? The announcing of the resurrection. So we're going to analyze this icon deeper. So this is just magnification of it from what's on the top, the laying, and you see here the putting of the aloes on his body that matches also what Joseph and Nicodemus did. Okay, similarities. Do you remember the four holes? Remember I told you at the very beginning, look at these four holes that are causes of burns. Before the burns of 1352, that was the big fire. The artist who did the Hungarian manuscript icon, why did he draw four holes on it? You see the four holes on the right here? In the middle. That's in the icon. Do you see the four holes there? Are you guys following what I'm saying or not? There's four here and there is five under them in the bigger crosses one. So the person who looked at the shroud, in order to say, I looked at the shroud of Christ, he left four L-shaped holes. Here is the way they look like. And he left here also four holes to give us the expression of the two sets of holes. This tells us a very important information. Why would anybody do any drawing? He could have just did the zigzag. The zigzag looks like the herringbone weave. By the fact that he put these four holes is because he says, I want to tell you this is the shroud that I looked at. It has four holes in it. And that says, I am giving you the information that I'm not just putting any cloth, I am looking at the shroud of Christ. And it's very fitting to put it in a funeral prayer book. So the manuscripts of prayer, which are dated to 1190, carry icons that say, this must be the shroud of Christ. I am drawing the shroud of Christ. I'm going to get further into this. The hand, look at this is from this big picture. We're amplifying the picture here, and on the top there is a square that he's drawing a piece of red circle at the hand, and it matches what we see on the shroud as well. More, look at the head. If you amplify the head, he put also some dots above the eyebrows and in the head and in the back in order to say, I have seen these blood locations on the head. 11 similarities. Jesus is naked, which is uniquely in the medieval era. His hands are crossed over his pelvis. Look at the icon. His hands are crossed the same way the shroud looks like. Jesus' right hand is over his left. There is a nail bloodstain in his right wrist. No thumbs are visible. Jesus' fingers are very long. There is a mark above Jesus' right eye corresponding to the reversed 3 bloodstain of the Shroud of Turin. The shroud is more than double his body's length. The shroud has a herringbone weave pattern. This is the zigzag thing. The zigzag pattern that is here. This zigzag. To tell us this is the herringbone pattern. That's that I looked at. The shroud has an L-shaped pattern of 4 poked holes. And then another pattern of 5 holes, which is the one in the bigger crosses. There is in the bigger red crosses. There is also 5 holes to represent the other 5 holes on the other side, which is this one, 4 and 5. Okay. There is image enhancement here. Do you see this green thing wrapping around the neck of this old person and then going around and then around the shoulder of the younger one? What is this? It shows that it's very long. This is the shroud, because the one under the deceased is too short. So the icon is depicting that around their neck is the shroud that they're going to wrap Christ in. These are the similarities, and I'm going to leave you with
Probably one of the most significant documents to be unearthed in the past 30 years or so with regard to the history of the Shroud is the Hungarian Pray manuscript.
2 of the illustrations are very significant. One of them shows burial preparations. You see Jesus lying on a burial shroud. You actually see Jesus lying on this cloth. And what's interesting about it is that the way the body is laid out is very similar to what we see on the shroud. But what is more fascinating is the second picture, which is the empty tomb. Or to be more precise, the empty shroud.
Very clearly, it is showing the zigzag lines of the herringbone pattern weave of the Shroud. The Shroud has a very distinctive weave.
Most importantly, it illustrated a set of L-shaped burn holes that are on the Shroud and predate the fire of 1532 that did all the damage down both sides of the Shroud. So if you looked at the Shroud prior to 1352, what you would see first, before you saw anything else, were these L-shaped burn holes which had dark chalk.
To me, I call this a DNA match. There's no question that what is depicted on the Hungarian Pray manuscript is exactly what we know today as the Shroud of Turin.
So we know that whoever illuminated the Hungarian Pray manuscript had seen what we call the Shroud of Turin at some point before he created that manuscript in 1191.
And that is much earlier than the first possible date assigned by this carbon-14 dating.
Of course, nothing of this is presented in the media because they want us to think you should dismiss it. And these are the 11 similarities. They didn't mention it all, I just gathered them here. I'm going to finalize in a couple of slides. You know probabilities. If a coin is tossed, you have a probability of half getting head or tails. If you have a die, because it has 6 faces, it's 1/6 to get any of the faces. So we're going to give 7 characteristics to focus on this cloth and see the probability it would fit another man other than man depicted in the 4 documents by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. First of all, it wrapped in winding sheets after death by crucifixion. That's very elegant. Not many common crucified people can have a dignified cloth for burial. It was a death for the slaves, and criminals followed with contempt for the corpse. They just throw their corpse. So it's 1 in 100 probability that will be assigned to this fact. It's very improbable to do this to a person. Second, both Christ and the man of the shroud had cap of thorns. No historical document mentions that somebody is crucified with a cap of thorns. It's a very low probability to assign to this characteristic. It's 1 in 5,000. Third characteristic, the crossbar of the cross, only occasionally the condemned carries the horizontal beam to the place of execution, but we're going to be generous and we'll say it 50-50. So it's a probability of half. Same odds have for using the nails, because other easier and faster way was to tie with ropes. So it's a 50-50 chance between nails and ropes. Characteristic number 5, a wound on the right side of the man of the shroud. The piercing is mentioned in the Gospel of St. John. Long time, I just wanted to present a case. I hope some of it sticks in your mind, and pray for me. Any questions?